I've been a fan of your work for a while, but there are also moments where I've been a little bit confused about like some of the things that you've done. You're running for Nancy Pelosi's seat that's being vacated, which is strange because she's so young. She's so young, probably one of the youngest communist voices we have in Congress, and it's really devastating for the left flank movement, the socialist movement in this country, to lose such a reliable and valuable spokesperson for our cause. And yet you are selfishly running to fill the role of Nancy Pelosi, the shoes, fill in Nancy Pelosi's shoes.
I've heard that so many times.
in one of the bluest places in I was gonna say in one of the bluest places by the population might be very blue, but I think like the moneyed interest is not.
Yeah.
And speaking of moneyed interest, you are technically moneyed interest. You're very moneyed up.
Yeah.
So let's start there. You've called yourself a class trader. Mm-hmm. What does that mean for you? Why do you say you're a class trader? How rich are you? And will you give me $1 million?
If you're doing good work, Hasan, I mean, yeah, I worked in the tech industry when I first came out to San Francisco, but I didn't grow up rich. I grew up middle class, went to public schools in Texas. And, my parents grew up, frankly, poor in India. I was the son of immigrants from India, right? And especially my dad. My dad was a refugee because of partition. And you're really well read on history, so you actually know what partition is probably. Mm-hmm. But, for people who don't know, partition was this terrible event where the British cut up India across religious lines. And my dad's family was one of the 15 million displaced families during that. And so, he was born in what's now Bangladesh, back then was East Pakistan, came over to Calcutta. And they ended up squatting in this abandoned Muslim dentist's office or a house. He probably had to go the other way. And, he grew up struggling. He had a family of 12 in this tiny 1-bedroom apartment, often had no idea where his next meal would be coming from. And those stories really shaped a lot of my childhood. My grandfather was a teacher. He started the public school in that refugee community. And even now, when I go back to visit Calcutta with my dad, there's people on the streets. This is this massive neighborhood with millions of people that live there. They will call out my dad and be like, "Your dad saved my life," right? That was the value of that service. And so my dad came here with literally $8 in his pocket. I used to say he came here with $20 in his pocket, and he actually fact checked me on that over Thanksgiving. He was like, "No, it was 8."
Okay, we're first call out.
Yeah.
You've been lying about how much money your father had. This
Exactly.
is the attack ads that are coming in.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I'm sorry, Dad, if you're watching Hasan for some reason. But
why say some reason?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. Actually, I don't know what my dad watches these days.
I am the number one outlet for unks, especially unks from developing nations, from Bangladesh to all around, really.
No, I believe that. So yeah, Dad might be in the chat right now.
Yeah, low key, they watch me with their hands clasped behind their backs, like they're watching Al Jazeera. They're like, "What's going on? What's Israel up to now?" Is what they're saying, and they're watching me.
Anyway, long story short, I didn't grow up political. I was saying all that to say, I didn't grow up political. I grew up with my dad's stories, and honestly, I didn't know. I speak Bengali, and I thought the word for politician in Bengali was the same word as crook until a few years ago. And so when I graduated college, I ended up coming out to San Francisco to work in the tech industry, and part of that was to make money, to put my family on financial stability. And part of it was I was a little naive. I thought I'd be using tech to solve some of these big problems in the world.
Were you an effective altruist?
No, that didn't exist back then.
Yeah, but you were inventing it from first principles.
No, I wasn't even that much into it. I was just a kid taking the first job he could.
I don't even care about doing.
I was just good. Tech seems cool. Yeah, I'll go try to make my mark. And I came out to SF, and you work in the tech industry, and you see all the problems all around you. The homelessness was going up literally while I was there. I came out in 2009. The cost of living was skyrocketing in that 2-year period. And I ended up, I joined this company, Stripe, as a second engineer. And, because I was in the right place at the right time, I ended up making a lot of money. And that was profoundly radicalizing.
What's your net worth right now?
I call myself a centimillionaire.
Okay, we go band for band. You got me? Wait, centimillionaire? What's that? The 100 million?
In the hundreds of millions, yeah.
In the hundreds of millions?
Yeah.
damn it. Subscribe. I can't even. We went band for like a second, for 1 second. I showed my first money wad and he was like, sheesh, you're done. Okay, so you have multiples.
Yeah.
Well, okay, to be fair, the last guy that sat in that seat was Tom Steyer. So
no, I don't got Tom Steyer money. I'll say that. But
what the fuck am I doing? I'm like, I'm the most prominent socialist voice in North America, and I've had a centimillionaire and a billionaire. What is happening? I've sold out. Everyone was right. I'm a sheepdog for the Democratic Party, and also, propping up wealthy people.
Moving up in the world, Hasan.
Yeah,
Is how you know, right?
So you're. I mean, I got a little bit. I got a little something. It's fine. It's some light. Something light. That's why you're sitting on the Dolce & Gabbana Razor collab chair. So you're a centimillionaire. My last question was, before we get into the Clash Trader equation, my last question to you was, how many millions will you give me?
Well, I try to figure out who needs it for what. So what do you need it for, Hasan?
Arm the revolutionary vanguard. No, just kidding. All right, we'll get to that in a second. So you're a Clash Trader. Yeah, you got a couple hundred mils, not a big deal. But somewhere along the line, you realize like this is unsustainable. This isn't working because before you ran for office, before you started running for office, you were in politics.
Yeah. I've been. I mean, so the whole long.
And people might be surprised where you were in politics.
Right. I mean, it's because I've had that whole story. I mean, like, it's crazy that you can just end up working at a place early on and just be in the right place at the right time, and you hit the startup lottery like I did, and you can have everything. And then, I worked hard for a couple of years, but they're like, teachers, nurses, the people actually run society, they work hard every day and they can't afford a home in San Francisco, right? So I didn't know, I mentioned I wasn't political, so I didn't know exactly what the problem is, but I knew this wasn't it. And so I quit tech. And at the time, the only person I heard talking about this stuff in any sort of a serious way was Bernie Sanders. And that's how I ended up joining the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. And I also got just really interested in this question of like, how have we gotten out of this mess before? How have other countries gotten out of this mess before? And I, read a lot. I had a whole, kind of new worldview that came up over the last 10 years. But that's why I've, worked on taxing the rich and fixing this.
New worldview, which is like the oldest guy in American politics who is,
I know, right?
Who has like a 800-year track record of promoting an even older ideology that I also happen to subscribe to as well.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more radical than Bernie in many respects. But having said that, so you encountered the gospel of socialism, is what you're saying. Would you consider yourself a socialist? Would you say you're a socialist?
I don't use labels because my experience of it, I'll tell you the stuff I'm running on, but my experience of it is like half the people just close their ears. And I run ideas first. Like I run on the policies
That's
first.
That's fair. I too was a coward at some point. No, I always say it's the biggest mistake of my career is to ever adopt the moniker, because then people put you in a box and they don't care about what you're advocating for. They don't want to hear what you have to say. There's a lot of baggage that people associate with the term. It's fine. Okay, next question. What's up with brown boys wearing Casio watches regardless of how much money they have? Because Zoran has like...
So this is actually a gift from my dad for my 40th, because he always wore this watch.
Is it like a swag thing? Is that...
No, I think it's just literally what every immigrant like dad wore their entire childhood.
Okay.
So that's what I got nostalgia for.
Okay. I mean, I couldn't help but notice because he pulled up with the
same. Is it the same Casio?
I don't think it was the same Casio, but he pulled up with the Casio when I talked to him as well. So you also worked with AOC for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that was very good. I think there was. This was like your political experience is in the early stages of like, I guess, the new American democratic socialist movement. Like your politics experience comes from that background, just so people understand. Then you left politics, you went back to, I guess, like the tech space a little bit, or you were still, fundraising for candidates? Like, what did you do?
I never left politics. I worked around Bernie. There's a group of us who started Justice Democrats.
Yeah.
And the initial idea around Justice Democrats was recruit hundreds of people to all run for Congress on.
This guy is also a Justice Democrat.
I know.
He's on the Justice Democrat lineup. Justice Democrats took a lot of W's home last night. So obviously we're going to be talking about that as well.
Yeah. But, that was the project through which we recruited AOC, ran her campaign in 2018 when she won as her chief of staff. I did the Green New Deal work with her in D.C. And after that, I've been running a think tank called New Consensus, where we've been doing basically like, I call it a sequel to a Green New Deal, but like a comprehensive, detailed plan for how do you actually build a new economy? How does like the nation intentionally build the economy it wants to build? So we call it the Mission for America. Part of it is like, we talk about the political strategy, we talk about the institutions we got to build, but we also talk about this whole other mode of governing you got to get into, that countries get into when they want to take this stuff seriously. So that's been the focus of my work for the last, since I left AOC's office.
Yeah. I'll be honest. There have been a lot of people on background that have vouched for you. One of them is my uncle. He really likes you, just so you know. Another one was my spy that I think at some point worked with you and had nothing but nice things to say. Eric Hovagim, who he's a HasanAbi head who now lives in China, content creator. He's great. It definitely, because when I saw that you were as rich as you are, and also on top of that, there was an instance where I believe you had fundraised against a DSA-backed candidate in San Francisco. I had a little bit of, I was a little bit worried. But you seem very solid. What was the reason why you fundraised against a DSA candidate, which I believe was also endorsed by Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah, it's a confusing situation locally. Long story there. Like the guy, I wasn't fundraising against him. I was backing this guy Bilal. And, I've known him. We worked on climate stuff together at the state.
Brown Boy Coalition?
It wasn't exactly Brown Boy Coalition. We did like an op-ed on a Green New Deal for California. But the bigger thing is like, I have the same housing politics as like Zoran, right? It's like, I think we have to build tons of social housing. I think we need rent control. And I think we need zoning reform. And we actually need to make it cheaper and easier to construct, right? And in that race, he lined up more with my housing politics. So that was one reason. But I just want to put it in context because, as you mentioned, like I'm a centimillionaire, so I do support tons of candidates and causes every cycle. So like that cycle, the biggest amount of my efforts were towards protecting people like Summer Lee and Jamal Bowman and Corey Bush, who are just getting this onslaught of APAC money coming their way. And it was also California Prop 5. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like a proposition to basically raise taxes to unleash tens of billions of dollars of affordable housing money. So yeah, we know when you support a bunch of stuff, you don't always line up on every single one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have this theory that unfortunately, blue safe havens, like blue strongholds, like New York and California, have oftentimes created some of the most annoying neoliberals in the party that safeguard third-way neoliberalism and centrism when there is so much more room to grow in terms of left position politics, left populism in general. Nancy Pelosi basically was the major hurdle to a lot of leftist politics being realized in the country from her position, from her throne, really. I mean, she's still Speaker Emerita and has done things directly from a hospital bed when she was traveling, when she fell and broke her hip, and to make sure that AOC was not appointed as the lead in the House Oversight Committee to become one of the voices of the party. What are some of the reasons why you feel best suited for this role?
So the reason I'm running ultimately is because I don't believe the current Democratic Party is at all capable of doing anything in this moment. They're not capable of stopping Trump. They don't have a vision for what a new economy would be that would actually stop fascism from coming back anytime. And, I did the Justice Democrats thing to try to push the party leadership. And my whole lesson from that was, you can't push them. You have to replace them. We have to primary them. We have to actually do the political revolution and go in there and replace a lot of the leadership. I saw someone in chat mentioned that, I donated Chiose. Yeah, when Chiose popped up, he said he was going to primary Hakeem Jeffries.
You're giving all the bans to the HasanAbi heads, but not me, HasanAbi. What's going on?
If you run for office, Hasan,
I'm not.
You know where to come ask it. But
okay.
Look, I was disappointed she didn't end up running. But yeah, I basically think we've got like a 2 to 4 year period where maybe we can completely change the party and actually build an economy that works for working people. And that's possible right now. And that's literally why I jumped in, and you're seeing it all across the country, right? There's candidates popping up all over the country, people like Reverend Haynes here and Nida Alam and others who want to challenge the establishment. And I've been reaching out to them. I'm trying to organize with them. I'm trying to talk to them because I think there could be a team of us that actually make it happen.
I think so too. And that is what I'm trying to do. A bunch of other content creators are trying to do to the best of our ability with the limitations that we have, obviously. But I do think that there is an organic movement that's building, and not even because tens of millions of Americans in the countryside or tens of millions of Americans living in like rural areas have tuned into my broadcast and become hypnotized with like the socialism beam or anything. They're just recognizing that the contradictions are worsening, and they're recognizing that like their material conditions are worsening, and the American trajectory is downward right now.
Yeah.
And when they see that, when they experience that, and then on top of that, they see state repression, whether it be unlimited tax dollars going to a foreign country like Israel to wage a genocide, to conduct a genocide with no accountability whatsoever, and then the domestic repression that comes along when you protest it, or whether it be all the money going to ICE to build a Gestapo force for Donald Trump that's unaccountable. When people realize that, when people start experiencing that, they get very frustrated, and they don't really have a really good outlet to communicate their desires and communicate a positive change for themselves. And I think it's important for people like yourself, people like myself, to do our very best to lead lead people in a better trajectory, in a more politically advantageous trajectory where they have some kind of autonomy, they have some kind of political power.
And I just want to say, like I've lived through a couple of these moments of change with like the Bernie campaign and with Justice Democrats, because that was in this moment where Trump had just won. People were pissed. People wanted to look for some vision for the future. And there was like this blip that allowed the squad to get elected, AOC to get elected. But it was still the case that when I was running those campaigns, the people showing up were like lefty activists, progressives, and then a little bit of like new people. Right now, the people showing up to my campaign, the people I see stepping up to run for office, it's like everybody. The mainstream Democrats are realizing that this current party is hosed, and we have to completely change it and do something new. And so we have to jump on it. It's happening all over the world. I mean, it's usually right-wing movements that are coming to power, but not everywhere. There's Morena in Mexico that, came to power, made people's lives better, and now they're the most popular party in the world, right?
Yeah.
So,
no, absolutely. A question I have for you is a question that I ask everyone that's running. I call it the Zoran method, but if you were to be defined by 5 policies, what would your top 5 policies be?
All right. Say number 1 is we got to make the essentials affordable by just having the government provide them. So that means universal health care. Medicare for all is a great start, but that's not a healthcare system. It's a health insurance program. We got to expand beyond that to direct government provided healthcare. I think something like the Nordic country system or the NHS is really the gold standard here. It means public power, which they have in cities all around California. They pay half of what we do. Publicly owned broadband. It means building tons of social housing and getting private equity and hedge funds out of our housing market. So that'll be number 1. Number 2, end political corruption. If we're asking for the government to do stuff for people, you got to be able to trust the government. So that means no congressional stock trading, no revolving door between Congress and the lobbying industry. I like a fully publicly financed election system, so no private money at all in our campaigns. And actually, hold accountable all the people who are doing corrupt stuff right now, investigate them, throw them in jail. We have to actually hold powerful people accountable if we want people to trust that this stuff works. 3, we got to end all the freaking wars. I mean, and get the power of declaring war back into the hands of Congress, slash the military budget, end U.S. interventionism all over the world. We've killed millions of people over decades of failed foreign policy. And that's been a bipartisan consensus, right? That's been Democrats and Republicans doing that. We have to completely break that because right now we've created a system where Trump is now basically dragging us into World War III. I know the way to put this is like, don't have World War III. None of this will matter if we have World War III, right? Number 4 is no one else really talks about this part, but I think we need to start planning for a publicly owned economy. And what I mean by that is, I know this is not like news to you, but what I mean by that is right now, we've got AI and robots that might be replacing a whole lot of work. And the way it's going right now is essentially, like, if you think about it, some of these industries, it's already happening, like the insurance underwriting industry, financial services. I'm a coder, right? So like coders might not exist in like a few years. These like AI companies are just going to subsume all these industries and end up owning a huge part of the economy. We're going to end up in this Mad Max dystopia where a few companies and people own everything and everyone else is in this permanent underclass. So instead, what I think we should do is try to create the Star Trek future, right? Where if something doesn't require work, we just provide that as a public option, essentially for free to the public. And then number 5, I'd say it would be to enact a mission for America to actually build a clean economy that creates prosperity for all. And I've talked about how we got the comprehensive detailed plan over at newconsensus.com. You should check it out. But we need whole new institutions for public financing that we don't have. We need a different kind of political strategy, and we have to get into this different mode of governing. We've been calling it mission mode, for lack of a better word, that basically every country goes through when they dramatically transform their economies. And if I can throw in a number 6, it would be build the train. We got to build the train. We got to build the train.
Stop.
Got to build high-speed rail.
Enough. You're just, you're doing this on purpose. I got to grab a drink. Hold on. God damn.
Build the train. Build the train.
Okay. Listen, everyone is already going crazy in the chat. That was really good. All 5 of those policies I'm on board with. You also mentioned social housing, which I feel like, and I try to bring this up with like electeds all the time. I feel like it's not necessarily at the forefront of people's minds for some reason, especially when they're campaigning. I think I know what the reason is, obviously. But how much of an emphasis do you have on trying to build policy initiatives, build policy papers? Because like you already have some structure of a think tank as well, so that like gives you a lot more opportunity, a lot more room to be an advocate for legislation, as opposed to a lot of congresspersons that just come in and even if they're like DSA backed or DSA endorsed or literally a part of the DSA unfortunately has limitations with respect to like policy papers that they can write and then like put in front of congressional representatives. And I think that goes a long way in terms of manipulating a lot of legislators because they don't want to fucking do the job. And to be fair, I also kind of understand because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of problems. Are there any initiatives specifically in terms of building social housing in this country? And what do you think some of the primary setbacks that will come up when focusing on building social housing?
Yeah. So at the think tank I run, New Consensus, we do have really detailed policy papers. I'd say the one of the most detailed proposals we have is for bringing back something called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. This is a state-owned corporation that existed during the New Deal and the World War II era. It was basically our engine of growth and development during that whole period. And it's kind of like a public bank. I think people know about public banks. Like it definitely, can do low interest loans and do all that kind of stuff. But it had a more proactive role in the market than that. Like it had this proactive role where it would go out and figure out what's missing, what can we not do, and why is it missing, and what do we need to spin off to do it. So I bring that up because I think we just don't have that organ in our government at all. So the RFC could do things like directly finance affordable housing and social housing, but it could also spin off a public developer if you can't find a nonprofit developer to do it, to build the social housing. You could do things like, and it did do this during World War II, stockpile building materials to control for inflation costs. It's just this whole thing. And the crazy thing is it's not like, some new idea. Basically, every modern developed country has some form of public finance. And it really boils down to this idea that we should, as a nation, have national goals. This is why I think things like AI and where we're at are really forcing this conversation, but we should have goals.
Like a 5-year plan.
Yes.
Maybe. Should. I agree with that.
We should have goals and we should use the economy to achieve those goals. Whereas right now what we have is an economy that's driven just by profit and then the nation follows. It's the tail wagging the dog, right? But it is like the whole idea around mission mode that I was talking about is you make plans, not just passing. You don't just pass policies and take your hands off the steering wheel. That's how we did in World War II. It's how Europe rebuilt after the war. It's how all the Asian countries got rich. And you also have to have institutions that finance and coordinate those plans. That's what the RFC was for us. And we had a bunch of state banks back in the day too. But long story short, I think it's not just, because a lot of people talk about the Faircloth Amendment. We have something called the Faircloth Amendment that prevents building new public housing in the country, and we absolutely need to repeal that. But it's not enough to do that. We actually have to create agency as a nation to be able to then go do it.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. What do you think about a federal jobs guarantee?
Yeah, I think we got to do it, especially in the age of AI. You know, we talked a lot about it in 2018 when I was in there with AOC. We're trying to popularize the idea. My only thing is I think a federal jobs guarantee has to be combined with an actual program of the jobs you're building, right? So that's why I want to talk about like the Mission for America. I mean, I'd love to see a federal jobs guarantee as like the way we start retraining the workforce into some guaranteed job at the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, the way I see it is we always have some pre-existing structures that we can point to as far as like competent institutions. One of those institutions is ironically the military.
Yep.
Except, you know, as time has gone on, the institutification has also taken place in the military, like privatization, and the major defense contractor bloat that exists, the expansive, the unimaginably expansive budgets for the military. That's like this unaccountable force that can't pass a budget ever. What's your solution? Because you talked about like ending all of the wars, but what's your solution to that? Can the military be restructured to work in favor of the citizens, whether it be citizens overseas, but certainly citizens here in the United States, because it's a massive jobs program in the hands of the federal government.
And it's a very skilled workforce. So yeah, I absolutely do. We have some plans for doing this in the Mission for America, but we should repurpose a lot, like the Army Corps of Engineers, to be building infrastructure in the country, right? I mean, we did some of this during COVID, right? Where like we built these military hospitals. I mean, they didn't get used, but they got put up really fast. But also the way we did the manufacturing miracle for actually mass manufacturing the vaccine was like, there was this general, I forgot his name, but he got put in charge of the whole supply chain. And he was literally like flying around the country, figuring out what the bottlenecks are and getting people to work together and then just solving this problem. And that kind of massive logistical support is something the military is good at. It's literally the same thing we did during World War II, where like, you know, we had the war, but we had to build this whole new economy at home to, create the arsenal of democracy. And FDR literally made this guy, Bill Knudsen, who was like he used to run GM, but he was like an engineer. He made him a 4-star general, gave him a plane, and he would fly around, you know, trying to get all these factories to get on board, building what we needed to build, sharing the IP, doing everything we possibly can. So yeah, we gotta reuse the military for good stuff, not just bombing countries.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Speaking of the military and endless militarism, what's your take on what's going on right now? As it seems, Israel, after waging a very bloody genocide and taking over even more territory in both Lebanon and Syria, has decided to goad the American government or bring around the American government to its final ambition of completely destroying the Iranian state. What's your attitude about that, and what's your attitude on Israel's genocide of the Palestinians as well? Because I think people will want to hear that as well, because I see it as a litmus test for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I've made it I'll talk about the Israel genocide in Gaza first. I've been pretty vocal about this from the start of my campaign. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. We should not be providing any funds to Israel because they're going to use that to commit genocide in Gaza. It's against our own laws. It's against international laws. And of course, it's just morally horrific.
So you're also committed to know that you don't make a distinction between offensive and defensive
Correct.
weapons.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Israel makes a distinction between offensive and defensive.
No, it doesn't.
funds.
It's fungible, and also any dollar that goes into Israel means it's a dollar that they use in building their offensive capabilities. It's ridiculous, unless
I mean, if there were any other country, this wouldn't even be a discussion.
Yeah,
right? If there's any other country committing genocide,
no one is being like, why don't we arm the Russian civilian population with
Exactly.
anti-aircraft munitions?
Right. And like the thing is, and there's also a real meaning to the word genocide. Like if you look at, when the word genocide got defined by the ICJ, we actually have a obligation to try to stop it, right? So it's not just that we should stop funding the genocide. We should be using whatever pressure we have, just like we did in South Africa, to stop the genocide, right? That's incumbent on us. But yeah, what's going on with Iran?
This is where you're supposed to say you're not suicidal. You have no fear. You don't own a weapon. You don't own a gun.
This is probably the biggest stream I've been on, so I should say that. Yeah, yes. I'm not suicidal. I have a great life.
Yeah, same with me. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, but I mean, with Iran, this is deja vu all over. I mean, I grew up. I wasn't political, but like the first political event I really experienced was the failed war in Iraq. I had no idea why we were going to war in Iraq, and it's ridiculous to me to see the same BS every time where, our politicians think, oh yeah, we're just going to go in there and decapitate this leadership and then democracy will rise, right? It never happens. That never happens. Like that happened in Iraq, happened in Libya, happened in Syria, and the same BS is happening in Iran. Like Trump and Hexet, they're out there thinking we're going to be out in a couple of weeks. Of course not. The war is expanding well beyond the borders of where they thought it would be. We are about to engulf the entire country or the entire world into this. I mean, there was a boat that just got torpedoed off the coast of Sri Lanka.
Yeah,
my wife is from Sri Lanka. Like her family lives there. And now is Sri Lanka going to get dragged into this freaking war? So it's awful. And the other thing I want to say is like, yeah, we're doing it at the behest of Israel. So this is going to be incredibly unpopular. And everybody in Congress, all the elected politicians know this is going to be incredibly unpopular. And so what you saw over the last couple of weeks was Ro Khanna and Tom Massey had the War Powers Resolution, try to stop this war from happening before it started. And you saw the War Hawk Caucus in the Democratic Party, aided and abetted by Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, drag their feet on it just long enough to let Trump start this war. Because what they want to have happen is we get too enmeshed in there. The U.S. gets too enmeshed to where we can't get out, right? And that's what we're seeing right now with it. Like anyway.
And it's also something that they fantasized about for many, many years themselves personally. And now Trump gets to do it and they don't even have to withstand the negative consequences in terms of like the political backlash that the Trump administration is already receiving. It's interesting because they haven't even really made a convincing argument beyond saying, oh, it was Israel that goaded us into this and urged us to do this, but then turning around and saying, no, actually, I wanted to do it, but actually, no, it was Israel. Meanwhile, they're obviously activating ground units to the best of their ability to try to foment some kind of like ethnic tension in the country. And it's very clearly like a Mossad operation as well. They're not even hiding it. And
the crazy thing is, there's like part of this is all the Israel money that controls our Congress, and part of it is like an actual death pact, suicidal maniac philosophy that a lot of Congress people have around this being Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus. Like they actually believe that in Congress, right?
Yeah. There's also the obvious like imperialism aspect of it as well, because like previous wars we've waged, like sure. Israel's been there as a consultant. Israel's played an important role in our regional design. Having said that, to act as though this is entirely in the hands of Israel is also silly. Just so people understand, this is something that our politicians are looking forward to because this is something that our military-industrial complex is going to benefit from. Every single radar installation that Iranian Shahed drones have blown up is economic activity happening in the countryside, or at least that's the way they approach the subject. That means like, oh, all the batteries that are depleted in the interest of defending Israel, even after Israel started this illegal war, that's munitions that need to get stockpiled again. That means we're going to get another $10 billion from the federal government.
And this is why when you look at, we'd passed $900 billion defense budget at the end of last year, and we'd pass it right before we went in and kidnapped Maduro in Venezuela. Trump had been saber rattling about that for months, so it wasn't a surprise that he did that. And he had 115 Democrats vote for that defense budget. And if you look at who their funders are, it's the defense contractors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is, I just really want to emphasize like how unpopular this is. It's like 16% of Republicans want a bigger defense budget, like, and only 3% of Democrats. And all these politicians know that. So like this delaying of the war powers resolution is just about, they don't want to be on the record because they saw what happened to everybody who voted for the Iraq war. And like, we can't, to do any of the stuff I'm talking about, to do any of the 5 things I mentioned, to change this, we have to completely wipe out like half of the establishment in DC, because there's no other way around it. We have to break that. There's no way to convince these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a real, I mean, it's more of like a holistic problem, but I think there's a real understanding amongst many Americans and many people in the Western world that like the democratic process that was sold to them as this concept of theoretical democracy is not actually working. There has never been a greater point of disagreement amongst the masses and their elected representatives than at this very moment. And I think in order to claw that power back, people are going to have to run and be open and be honest in the same way that you are right now. Let's see. Let's ask you some other questions. You've argued that voters chose Trump in 2024 because they wanted economic change. What specific day one structural changes will you fight for? Because I already asked you the top 5 policies, but I want to know more in detail about like what kind of legislation you'd push for day one.
Yeah, I mean, day one in 2026 is still going to be a Trump presidency, right? So there's a set of things where I think we actually can get wins, and then there's going to be a set of things where I think we have to really set up the fight and the entire grounds for in which the 2028 election happens. So the place where I think wins can happen is going to be a lot of anti-corruption measures and actually foreign policy, because I think those are areas where there's a massive amount of bipartisan consensus, at least amongst people. And there's some bipartisan consensus in Congress, actually. Like when I did I tried to work on the stuff to get the U.S. out of Yemen back when there was a massive famine going on there. And we worked with like Matt Gaetz's office on that, right? So there is some of that in Congress. And the thing is, though, when you go to Congress, leadership doesn't want you to have a vote on these issues because they're covering for their members. So the way you force the issue is you use discharge petitions. That's the same thing Ro Khanna and Tom Massey did for the Epstein files. You basically force a vote. Leadership hates it. I don't care. And so that's what I'm going to do on, banning congressional stock trading, banning the revolving door between Congress and the lobbying industry, trying to shrink the military budget, trying to get us out of war in Iran, I don't know what the situation will be by that point. But then the other part of it is going to be the grounds on which the 2028 election happened, which I think is going to be, it's like cliche to say, it's the most important election of our lifetime, but it is going to be an incredibly important election, right? And that is going to be a combination of the ideas that exist and the political power that exists. I believe we build that political power by, racking up some W's in Congress with a team of us who are fighting against the establishment and actually making some wins. You turn that into hundreds of people running for Congress, somebody running for president who have a real vision to turn things around. But then I'm going to introduce legislation for things like recreating the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, right? To like actually do public financing. I'm going to introduce legislation for, how do we start having the public ownership economy? How do we start maybe taking equity stakes in these AI companies? Or, an idea that we've been pushing at New Consensus, which might happen is basically, what do you do when these AI companies, when their bubble bursts, right?
Well, there's something that I think was really interesting that Jeremy Corbyn tried to put forward in the Labor Party back in the day, which was through public finance banks, offering workers a first right of refusal in terms of bankruptcy. If a company was about to go insolvent, then the workers could set up like a cooperative corporation to seize control over the company in its entirety, rather than offer like some kind of golden parachute to the executive class and then like literally tell all the workers to fuck off and hopefully they can get like a limited amount of welfare if they're lucky enough. I think this is a radical and transformative idea that could aid in workers taking ownership over their own work in many industries that are basically on the verge of their bubbles bursting, whether it be AI or numerous other sectors.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think an AI, like the thing that as we had in mind And I'm curious to get your take, because part of this is like, these are all new ideas. We're trying to figure out what's actually going to happen in the future, right?
Yeah.
But imagine the AI companies, the bubble burst, and these companies plus their banks, it's a huge amount of our economy, and they're going to come to the government and say, give us a bailout, or because we're too big to fail. So in that moment, imagine that instead of bailing them out, we actually buy them out for pennies on the dollar. Similar idea to what you said Corbyn did, except not necessarily the workers, but the government does it. Turns all the data centers into essentially public utilities, or turns the companies into like not-for-profit, mission-driven companies. And we open source the models, and we use the compute power as our version of electricity. Like, I think what electricity was to the 20th century, compute power might be for the 21st century, right? And then these essentially become utilities that we then use towards the good stuff. Yeah, we'd use it to cure cancer rather than making more slop feeds.
How do you feel about the nationalization of our extraction industry? Because you brought up the Nordic model quite a bit, and one of the biggest benefits is obviously like sovereign wealth funds that are directly funded by the entirety of the extraction industries in Norway.
Yeah.
Whether that be oil, whether that be the forests, or virtually all of the natural wealth that natural resources the country has, in some way, shape, or form, is controlled in the hands of the government. And then, the surplus labor value that they extract, they put back into the sovereign wealth funds. Is there any interest in doing something like that?
Yeah. So in the Mission for America, it's like I think we're at 22 chapters now of like detailed plans for what to do about every sector of the economy. And one of the plans is for how do you nationalize the fossil fuel industry?
How do you not call yourself a socialist? You already wrote Das Kapital, it seems.
I'm just saying, like, these ideas, especially because in some cases I'm going a little bit more radical than, say, like some of the lefty groups are. Like, I always get asked, like, are you for stopping all fossil fuel extraction? I say, no, I'm for nationalizing it, right? And
also, I mean, nationalizing it is the first step, but that doesn't mean you like improve or increase production or increase the productive capabilities. Nationalizing is an incredibly important first step to move into a radically transformative vision of what we must do with energy to begin with.
Exactly. Like, and there's this other component to it, which is a lot of these industries, just like the military, have really highly trained workforces, right? So you don't want to just actually have them go totally bankrupt and have all those workers lose their jobs. They could be using those, the people working on offshore oil company, rigs should be working on offshore wind farms. The people who've been, fracking for natural gas could be working on plugging a lot of these methane leaks all over the country, right?
Yeah.
And so if you nationalize it, you can start directing it in a sane way towards what you want to do, and you can start winding it down in a controlled way, right?
Yeah, people always say retraining doesn't work, and I'm like, okay, well, people in Western Pennsylvania don't have like a genetic predisposition to working in fracking. The only reason why they work there is because that's the only way to get $100,000 jobs after industry left.
Yeah.
And for years and years, they had no real good benefit, good wage jobs that were readily available. And now they know how to fucking frack.
Well, and the reason retraining doesn't work is because we live in this society where we can't imagine actually having
it's not retraining, it's just training.
It's just training. You don't have anything at the end of it. Like there's this great book called Janesville about what happened in Janesville, Wisconsin. That's where Paul Ryan's from, when they shut down the GM shut down their car factory there. And Obama, this is during Obama's era, they did all these retraining programs to retrain all the car workers for into like electricians and all this other stuff. And at the end of 4 years, it turned out that the people who had done the retraining programs actually were worse off financially than their colleagues who just like went and got a minimum wage job at Walmart. And that was because there's no job at the end of it. Retraining works in the context of an actual plan of what you're going to do.
Yes. Training to actually fulfill an important part of whatever like labor necessity exists is how you're supposed to do it, is how many other countries would do it. America, we don't do that. That's why for the longest time there was learn to code, right? And it became the rallying cry at first as like this affirmative vision, and then it turned into a very negative thing to be associated with. And we're also literally reeling from the impact of learn the code. At the time, I thought it was awfully suspicious that there was a lot of programs such as this one. And I thought like, oh, these are some good jobs that are readily available. But I think they're trying to, and by they, I mean you too, kind of. I mean, Loki, you probably took advantage of this situation as well as someone who worked in these in the tech sphere. But I felt as though they were trying to lower, like by diluting the labor pool, they were trying to lower the wages overall to make it like a much more competitive field.
I guess. I mean, I was one of the workers, so I think it
Yeah.
would have been bad for me. But I honestly found the whole thing really cringe, and I think this is part of what comes from when you don't grow up in necessarily a white collar family. It's just like, think about the flip side right now, because like AI is coming after a bunch of white collar jobs first. So imagine if I just went to San Francisco and said, we're going to do retraining programs to turn y'all into solar panel installers, right?
Yeah.
Would that fly in San Francisco? Like people
No.
would push back against that, right?
No.
Like, so it's very natural. Like I think when you just go to a community
Actually,
and just
that's
say,
not even true. It would fly. If you went to like some of the more underserved communities in San Francisco and you were like, we're building a factory here. First, we need working hands to build a fucking factory. Then we need working hands to be trained specifically to, retool solar panels.
Right.
Then it would work. If you offer them, 100,000 plus jobs, $100,000 a year plus jobs, they're gonna go there rather than working at Walmart. It's not like they're working at CVS because they fucking love the corporate brand and identity. They're working there because that's the only readily available
but
job.
I'm saying like not just to low income communities, like go into like the coders working fancy
Yeah.
jobs, right? And I agree, they would take it, but you have to have like dignity attached to it. Like people
Yeah.
aren't just gonna, I don't know. It's like to me, it was such a pretentious kind of elitist push to be like, we're gonna go to West Virginia and do code boot camps, and that's gonna fix their economy.
Yeah, I've always the reason why I brought up the Western Pennsylvania thing is because like at the time when I was doing this advocacy, renewable energies was a growing sector. Like was a massively growing sector at a time when government subsidies by 80% was still going to the oil and gas industry, right? These oil and gas giants. We've completely dropped that anyway. We just decided China dominates that space. China literally now controls the future of energy. And we're just leaning heavily into this finite resource that is eventually gonna we're eventually gonna run out of, and also is destroying the planet simultaneously. But if they were to have at the time like built solar panel factories or invested into R&D for like battery manufacturing and then educated people or trained people into working in said factories, we would have a much more robust manufacturing base in this country rather than whatever the fuck Donald Trump is doing with these tariffs. And then, Howard Nuttlick goes on television and he's like, oh, these factories actually are not going to bring real jobs. It's going to be AI and automated. So there will be economic activity in your region. You just won't see any of the benefits of it. It's ridiculous.
So the thing that really pisses me off about this, like, we just like throw up our hands like, oh, China's won. It's like China 10 years ago, but I guess it was 15 years ago now, they decide we're going to build EVs, right? They made this plan. And at the time, all of the Western media was making fun of them because they're like, they'll never catch up. Our technology's too great. Of course, they're not smart enough, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then literally like last year, they started building EVs that are better than ours. And we're like, wow, we're cooked. What is that? Like,
have you seen Jim Farley?
No.
Ford CEO Jim Farley went to China. His daily driver is a Yangwang. He brought back a fucking EV from China, and he openly says his daily driver is a Chinese electric vehicle. And he literally said, if these cars come here, it's over for Ford manufacturing.
And it's a problem of like our industries are not innovating and actually.
Oh, sorry, it's a Xiaomi SU7.
Xiaomi, yeah.
I have a lot of fans.
But I actually have a worry about this because if you travel around the world, you see Chinese EVs everywhere, right? Like,
yes.
It's in America, if you're like, unless you're Jim Farley, you actually go try. I think the car manufacturers here, they have this sense that they don't realize how bad it's gotten, so they have no incentive or any reason to try any harder because we've essentially created this completely protected ecosystem for them with the tariffs and the sanctions. And I'm not like, sanctions and tariffs and stuff matter in the context.
I'm a fan of trade protectionism by design, but I also believe that you have to make competent product and competitive products.
Exactly.
You can't just go to Laos and be like, you have to buy F-450s.
Yeah, and
you can't go to Italy and be like, you have to buy a car that requires you to have a commercial driver's license that literally cannot operate on the regular roads in Europe.
It has to be combined with a real plan for how do you build your industry, and the tariffs have to wind down. Like that's what China did, right? They protected their industry for 10 years, and then they said at the end of that, you're going to have to compete internationally, and so they forced their companies to be good enough to do that.
Yeah. And the tariffs are actually demonstrably having a negative impact on American manufacturing anyway. Not only have we experienced a lot of job loss in the manufacturing sector, which is hemorrhaging regardless of what anyone says or does, but also beyond that, I mean, the way to restart American industry, if that's like an issue of national security concern, which I don't even care about, I don't, deal in terms like that. But even if you wanted to build a robust manufacturing base, like you need some level of central planning that puts the working class first.
I mean, and the thing is, like, we have done this in the past. I mean, that's why, like, when I talk about the World War II example,
Exactly.
that we did that, and that, like, you can call it whatever, like social. We didn't call it socialism back then, but it's just like the American system, and that playbook that we developed of, making these plans for how to build up an industry, financing it, actually, making goals. That is the exact same playbook that Germany used after the war, that South Korea used, that Taiwan used, that Singapore used, and that China used. The only difference is China just continued using it. They didn't decide, after they got richer, they didn't say, all right, now it's time for private capital to run everything.
Yeah. And while there is the existence of private enterprise in China, there's still ultimately a lot of state control over every aspect of capital, including directly changing capital flows that go along with their goals, that go along with their trade agenda, or go along with their manufacturing agenda.
And I think there's the first step is just like have the ability as a state to finance what you want to build, make plans for what you want to build. And that's why for me, like, building the train is not, it wouldn't just make my life easier to come back and forth between LA, because I'm gonna be on your stream all the time, Hasan, but it's more that, to me, it's like this test of, can we do anything as a country? Like, if we can't build high-speed rail, we are hosed. And if you remember, when China built their first mile of high-speed rail, it was from Shanghai.
Is it 2008, I think?
It's like around there. Because I remember actually I had a stopover in Shanghai soon after it got built, and it was like all the news. And it was like a mile from the airport to the city center. And at the time, it was the most expensive per mile project in the world of rail, all the, as usual, all the Western media, everyone was making fun of it.
Laughing at, like the ghost cities.
Yeah, and their response was, well, we'll just keep going, right? And then over the next 10 years, now they build rail faster and cheaper than anybody, and they own the whole industry.
Why don't you want to spend all of that money instead on something productive, like dominating the periphery nations militarily, so that we can extract super profits for a handful of people that are all mentioned in the Epstein files?
Yeah. Well, I guess we tried that route and it's gone here.
Do you ever feel like real late stage capitalism hasn't been tried?
We're in the middle of it, right?
Okay.
We're in the middle of it.
So it hasn't been tried. There's more room for growth.
There is more room. I don't know how long the late stage capitalism keeps going. And
why do you hate wealthy people?
I don't hate wealthy people. I think it would make
me either.
I honestly doesn't, sometimes you ask me like, why'd you become a class trader? It just makes no sense to me why you wouldn't. Like, if you look at the future of this country, like, why wouldn't you use whatever power and privilege you have to try to fix the system instead of just trying to, because it's not going to end up well for anybody if we end up in this dystopia.
The way that a lot of people approach the subject with someone like myself, because like they have horse blinders on and they think I have the same level of wealth that you do, or Tom Steyer does, or Jeff Bezos does.
Which I totally understand, because after you get above a certain amount of wealth, it's all the same.
It does. But like, I think there's a big difference between my level of wealth and both of you guys. I mean, there's a big difference between you and Tom Steyer.
I mean, that's the thing that's really absurd about this, right? Is like, I'm technically like closer to someone who's like working for money than Tom Steyer, even though it makes no sense. Like,
I exactly. That's how much wealth they have. It's crazy.
It's just like absurd.
But people
how much
think
wealth
you're like trying to run away. They're like, oh, you're. People have grown to be cynical about this sort of stuff because they just like have only seen unlimited greed, endless greed from people who are wealthy.
Yeah.
And what they fail to comprehend, or at least like what the way I approach it is like, I've been outside of America. Like, I know that a better vision, or at least like countries that have at times moved in a better direction than the United States of America exist out there. So when you see that, you're like, Yeah, I would love to live in a country where there's like higher trust and live in a country where there's like robust public transit, live in a country that's more cohesive and even has like somewhat of a national identity as a consequence of like being around diversity of thought, diversity of background, but also diversity of income too, because that's how you advance society. That's how you have an advanced society. And Americans, I think, by and large, don't comprehend that. Where they're like, "Oh, if you're rich, like you're supposed to hoard all your wealth." It's like, no, I'm perfectly willing to pay even more than I do currently, which is definitely like a much higher percentage of my income because I just run off of pure income. I'm a 1099 employee of Amazon technically. So, but even then, like I don't need the money. I want to live in a nicer country. I want to leave. Yeah. I want to live in a country where the streets are clean. I want to live in a country where like everyone is better protected. They don't have to like constantly worry about where their next dollar is coming from, whether they're going to make ends meet at the end of the month. Like that is an infinitely better country to live in, even as a wealthier person.
Yeah, like why? I mean, because there's also the flip side of that. Like there are countries around the world that have way worse inequality than us, where there is a small group of elite leaders who hoard all the wealth, and everybody else is just like on subsistence living. And I don't want to live in that society, right? Yeah. Like it's your life is worse, and I don't know, on a personal level, I just don't get the feeling. Like I mean, I told my dad's story, but like my dad. He like just getting a visa to come to this country for him was a lottery ticket. And so he spent his entire life, like in my childhood, saving every extra dollar, sending it back to our family who was in poverty in India, trying to give, help our immigrant community in Texas. So like, if I get even luckier than my dad, why wouldn't I do everything I possibly can to fix this?
That's something that you brought up that I also bring up all the time, which is like luck. I won the lottery. I win the lottery every single day. Like it shouldn't have to be that. Like that shouldn't be the only way that you actually succeed. And a lot of people, I think, a lot of people have deluded themselves into believing that the concept of meritocracy is real, and that is basically the thing that holds this entire system together, where they have to believe in some ways that Elon Musk worked harder and smarter by 300 billion, 400 billion times than the average than the average person to achieve the profound level of wealth, the unimaginable levels of wealth and power that he's been able to garner.
I mean, having met a lot of people who've made a lot of money in Silicon Valley, I know for a fact that that's not true, right?
It's luck. But it's also, literally luck. It's such a big part of it.
It shouldn't matter. I don't know, the whole concept of meritocracy itself. Like, yes, we should make sure people who are capable are able to do the jobs that are suited to them. But this idea that only a small portion of society deserves a good life is fundamentally against my views, right? Yeah. Like, why that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why wouldn't we try to make sure everybody has a good life?
No, I 100% agree with you on that as well. Okay, I mean, you've been knocking it out of the park for every question. What are your opinions on China? We got to find something that you're going to have a bad take on. Let's hear it. You already said you've been to China, so I suspect you're probably not going to have a negative opinion on China. I wouldn't say I've been
to China because I literally just had like a layover in Shanghai where I was stuck in a hotel and ended up watching a random documentary about New York subways. I have a really strange memory of that.
Would you commit to nuclear first strike mainland China if China militarily overtakes the Philippines, South Korea, and Taiwan? That's a joke. That's not a serious question.
I mean, my position on China is we have to get to a point of cooperation and stop this freaking Cold War. Like everything from 2 points. Like one, we can't have World War III. We cannot have World War III. If World War III happens, everything else doesn't matter, And the more that we, our politicians, just keep like poking the bear, the worse it gets. And so, yeah. And then on top of that, there's like these actual problems internationally that we have to work on. Climate change, the threat of existential or runaway AI. These are things we have to actually cooperate on. But like the thing that kind of bugs me about how our politicians think of any other country, right? Like whether that's China or Iran or any of these countries where our politicians want to go to war and saber rattle, is they think of the populations in these countries as monolithic blocks, like they're not made up of thinking individuals. And the question I always pose to people is like, what do you think we would do if like China came in and started doing using the same rhetoric that our politicians do with China, right? What do you think we would do if like,
I use the alien force comparison because like even the gap, like the imperialism gap between us and China is so vast that like in order for a country to have been able to like dominate us as we have the entire planet, it would literally truly have to be a far technologically advanced alien force that came outside of this planet.
But I think even in the context of like our current society and the current global arrangement, just take like one example, because sometimes I think the pushback that I'll get is from people saying like, well, we stand for human rights and we want to call out human rights violations. And I get that. No, I don't laugh at that. Like, I do think we stand for human rights, but I just say like, think about.
I think we stand for human rights.
Yes, like America has had its own human rights violations.
We stand for human wrongs.
So like, what moral standing globally are we standing on? But the second thing is, like say I support Black Lives Matter, right?
Yeah.
And then say like, Xi Jinping is coming in and dumping a bunch of money to support Black Lives Matter and saying how great Black Lives Matter is. Does that help Black Lives Matter? Of course not, right? Like that doesn't actually help the movements inside the countries.
I wish he would give me money to help Black Lives Matter.
But what I'm saying is like we don't.
Dear Leader Xi, I'm right here.
Like whenever
he won't give me money, so maybe you will. Okay. I asked him first.
I didn't say no. I just said you got to run for office, and I will. But all I'm saying is like when like America or when our politicians go and do the saber rattling, they don't realize that there are factions in other countries that then gain power, that then pressure the leadership into more hawkish positions and makes the whole thing a tinder block. Or not tinder block, but
tinderbox.
Tinderbox. There we go. And we're literally like dropping bombs on this tinderbox.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this was an argument that was presented back in the day. I've talked about it before as well. Like, but during the time of the civil rights struggle, the USSR was actually, consistently cutting propaganda, talking about how, American minorities were getting fucked over. It was true. It was true. Obviously they had a lot more initiatives in terms of like defending anti-imperialist, anti-colonial action regardless. So it was in line with their foreign policy goals as well. But like, even as a matter of, I guess, quote unquote, national security, these are issues that America has to solve if they don't want, existential threats to the nation being born from within. And unfortunately, the only direction that we've headed towards, in the absence of any sort of material improvement being the forefront of any campaigning on either party, has been to consistently advance this like white nativist agenda, anti-immigrant agenda, and try to divide the working class along these sectarian and ideological boundaries.
And that's the only thing that works when you have a shrinking pie. It's not the only thing that works, but it's the mindset that is easiest to pitch. And that's why I say, like, if we can't use democracy, if you can't prove that democracy is going to work to improve the material lives of people, then fascism will win, because that's an easier ideology. And I think it's no coincidence that, in the periods in America's history where we have had more inclusivity, it wasn't a utopia, but during the 60s and 70s, there were these movements like the civil rights movement, the women's rights movements, the gay rights movements. We were way more welcoming to immigrants. That's how my parents got here. That was in the context of us having had decades of wages going up. We had just put a man on the moon. We had built the interstate highway system. We were so optimistic. So you have to do both of those things at the same time. You have to be able to pitch how we need immigrants in this country to help us build this, and actually pitch a different vision of the future. That's not what I think Democrats do most of the time. Democrats adopt the right-wing frame and then try to like triangulate on like, if I just took the Republican position on this thing and then a different position on this, and maybe I'll win. No, you need a different vision that's a complete change of the status quo.
And you have to be unafraid to be bold and unafraid to lead on that. I think if there's one example that I always go back to, in spite of like the horrifying realities on the ground in Gaza, the gains made in terms of broad awareness initiatives that was able to destroy multiple billions of dollars being spent for a very sophisticated propaganda campaign that made Americans over such a short period of time change their attitude entirely on the issue of Israel. If that can happen, then anything can happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As long as you're bold, as long as you lean on the side of truth and justice, and you consistently engage in this advocacy, eventually people will actually pay attention. Eventually people will be convinced.
And I just want to say, that's happening. It keeps happening on every issue. Like, we're in a politically chaotic moment right now, right? And that's the same reason, that's how Donald Trump suddenly comes to power. He changes the entire Republican Party. But we can do that too. We can do that for a better cause. And it won't happen if you're always waiting for the polls to tell you which way to go, because that just takes too long.
Yeah.
You have to be able to jump on these moments and lead.
Last question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Would you fund an oil tanker that I will command to break through the unjustifiable American blockade and finally deliver energy, much needed energy, to the island of Cuba?
We got to stop the embargo of the island of Cuba. I have to look into the logistics of getting an oil tanker.
Okay,
I don't think I have oil tanker money.
I don't think we can get OFAC clearance, but like maybe for like a cool 20 mil, we can make it happen. Okay,
I don't know. I mean, this is
I
beyond
didn't
my
hear
pay
a no,
grade.
chat. I'm just saying, because I'm going to Cuba in the end of this month.
Yeah.
With Progressive International. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all.
Yeah, with Giannis Varoufakis.
Yeah, Giannis and David Adler. He's great.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of medical supplies that we're going to be bringing with us, but it's more so just like a broad awareness initiative, because once again, the real the issue, the major setback for the governance of Cuba and the sovereignty of Cuba as it stands currently is to cut through the noise of like the anti-Cuban government lobby that is like very powerful in this country.
Yeah.
Nowhere near as powerful as the Israeli lobby is, but certainly powerful enough to make people either oblivious to what's going on or oblivious to the harm that we've done to this island. And at first it's awareness initiatives, and then it's like material support, hopefully.
Yeah. It's horrible what we've done to that country for decades. And I think I generally hate all broad-based sanctions and embargoes because it is collective punishment for a whole group of people for, whatever failures leaders might have. It doesn't help. And it like entrenches that leadership in the country, in fact, right? Because when you do what we've done to Cuba, there's of course black markets that the leadership controls when you do sanctions like that. But anyway, yeah, I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
To
All
bring
right.
awareness.
One last question.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for taking the time out and coming on the broadcast. And this will be a little bit of a tough one. It's not a secret that there are a lot of Democratic Socialists in my chat. DSA affiliates, people in DSA, both in San Francisco and all around the country. And because of the thing that we talked about earlier, where your support against the DSA endorsed candidate, like how there's a little bit of distrust.
Yeah.
Now there's probably still a lot of people who you've won over so far with your advocacy. You certainly won me over, I'll be honest. But what do you say to the rest that might still have a little bit of scrutiny, given your tech background, given the wealth that you have? How do you convince those people that you're a real one?
Yeah, well, first I'd say, there are a lot of folks from DSA volunteering on the campaign. We've got folks from a bunch of groups, but engage with me. I'm trying to run a campaign that's like as transparent and open as I possibly can. I mean, you probably got I just say what I believe and I'll answer every question. And to that end, I do town halls every week. I'm doing one in every neighborhood in San Francisco. I do a voter call on Zoom. So if you go to my website, I don't ask for money. I ask for you to sign up for a voter call, and I do them every day. But also I've met with folks at DSA, and there's a bunch of stuff I'm going to work together with them on. I mean, I think there's going to be a public bank ballot prop in San Francisco this cycle. I'm going to work with them on that. I'd say please engage, and I'm happy to engage with anybody, DSA or not, in San Francisco and anywhere.
What are some groups that you're trying to secure the endorsement of, like unions and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean,
and what have you gotten so far?
So far, it's been a lot of groups are kind of in the middle of their endorsement process. So so far nationally, I'd say Jamal Bowman's probably my biggest endorsement. I love Jamal. There's also No Dem Left Behind, Blue America PAC, a few groups like that. Locally, there's there's basically three of us in this race. So it's me, State Senator Scott Wiener, who you're probably familiar with, and the Supervisor Connie Chan. And a lot of the unions have more of a relationship with some of the establishment folks. And so, I'm talking to them. They like me. I think it's a top two system. So in a lot of the cases, I might not get their endorsement now, but I will when I'm in the top two. But yeah, I'm hoping to get anybody. I mean, the way I think about this, like I'm trying to do essentially a political revolution kind of politics. And so when you do that, you can't really rely on endorsements. When I ran AOC's race, like nobody endorsed her, including like Working Families Party endorsed Joe Crowley, right?
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how it goes. So I'm gonna do what I can, but of course I'm talking to.
But you also need ground game, and I do feel like well, I can't speak for DSA San Francisco, but like that was a big part of how Zoran was able to overcome great odds.
Yeah.
Your situation is a little bit different because you have your own personal financial backing as well. You've been doing this for quite a while. You have existing relationships. You also have I will admit, out of all the candidates that I talk to, you have a profound understanding of policy, because this is usually one of the issues that I have. Like sometimes I have someone who's very radical, but very green, and they don't have a working understanding of like how the legislative body works or how the position that they want to achieve, like what they need to do in that situation, how to sometimes play ball, where the areas of pressure are. Whereas given your background, given your experience, like you are, you have deep and intimate knowledge with how politics works in America. But as far as like winning the immediate race, I mean, Scott Wiener is it's not, like, no disrespect, but Scott Wiener is going to present himself as a progressive, but we all know the last 2 years that he spent defending Israel, only to turn around and be like, "Oh, actually, I was just kidding when I was doing that." I'm not mistaken, right? That was
Scott Wiener. We did it was worse. Like we had a debate where there was a lightning round question. They asked us, "Do you think what Israel's doing is?" He just didn't answer. And then 2 days later, he's like,
everybody gets caught up on those paddles. That paddle system is so good for people like yourself. Like for real left flank candidates, the paddle system is like, boom, yes, every time. And then if you're like somewhat inconsistent, if you're like a neoliberal, or if you have like any sort of hang up on something that's like a very black and white issue, you get fucking cooked every time.
And what I said, because he tried to be like, well, it's a complicated, it's like, no, when you're in Congress, you vote yes or no. Like Rashida Tlaib has a resolution that says, is Israel committing genocide in Gaza? What's your vote on that, right?
Yeah.
You don't get to explain it. But yeah, on the ground game side, we actually have the strongest ground game of any campaign in the district, because I've been campaigning since February of last year.
But I mean, but it's never enough, man. It's never enough.
Of course it's never enough.
Especially considering your somewhat radical, even though very sane, policy positions and your consistent advocacy against Israel's genocide. There's going to be a lot of moneyed interest.
There's going to be a bunch of money that comes in after me. But I just want to say, like, this is what I see every single time, right? Like, if you actually are pitching real change of some sort, you attract a whole new base for your campaign. I mean, at every single event, I ask people, for how many people is this your first time doing something in politics? And it's like half the people every single time. But we've had over 3,000 people sign up to volunteer. We've knocked over a quarter of the doors in the district already. And every canvas, we get like 40 or 50 people, which is huge for San Francisco. And like, we did our office opening party in July. This is actually what made us start our ground game, because we did an office opening back last July. I thought maybe 100 people would show up, because up to then it was just like mostly a social media and press campaign.
Yeah.
And then like 500 people showed up, and then it just kept going. Like we had 800 people at our first rally. So we've got momentum, but it's not momentum from the existing like established organizations necessarily. It's a bunch of new people showing up. Same with Zoran. I mean, I went out to canvas for Zoran actually. At the same time, I went out to go meet Chiase and try to get him to primary Jeffries. But at Zoran's canvas, I asked everyone there, like, how'd you end up here? Like, are you part of DSA? And there's some DSA people there, but most of the people were just new.
No. The reason why I brought that up is because like it's very good to kickstart that process, because like. I don't know at what point you were doing the canvassing, but like in the beginning when I went and linked up with him, like
it was all DSA. Yeah,
it was all DSA, and it was all because like even the fact that I went and talked to him or Chapo and all these other leftist podcasts were invested in Zoran early on is because he had a lot of good people around him that were vouching for him. Because, like, I'll be honest, like, I watched his fucking Gravel video about social housing in Red Vienna many, many years ago, but I didn't remember him from that at all, right? Like, but that was what it was. It was like a lot of very good people that I trust, that I believe in, that were vouching.
Yeah, and I
and
honestly,
some of them have vouched for you as well.
because
So,
it was the same. A lot of them worked on the AOC race in 2018. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really. I mean, DSA New York has built a real machine.
Yeah.
You know, which is awesome.
it's fucking dope. I went and I saw the slate
Yeah.
in New York, and I was like promoting the slate that they have. It's excellent. We got to build that operation virtually in every state, especially red states. I think there's a real opportunity, given the weakness of the Democratic Party machine in red states, that
Yeah.
you could actually take advantage of their lack of interest. I mean, even with someone like Tallarico, who just kind of came out of nowhere, really. I mean, he was not like a known brand at all, and he was able to carve out a space for himself with a fairly uniting message. I think he still needs work on the on you know some aspects of his policy. I think he's like a little bit more restrained for some reason when it comes to leaning into socialized medicine, and I think he has room to grow on the issue of Israel. He can speak very convincingly and very empathetic. In a very empathetic way about these issues, but like I think he needs to go way beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, when we started Justice Democrats, the project initially was called Brand New Congress, and we were actually trying to recruit people everywhere, like in Republican primaries and Democratic primaries. This is before Trump got elected, and I'm very I've been I mentioned I was trying reaching out and talking to a bunch of people and like have a relationship with Graham Plattner. I've been supporting Dan Osborne for a while, because he's trying to do that in Nebraska. And I want to give a shout out to Corbin Trent, who's out in Tennessee. He's got an amazing blog called America's Undoing. We work together on AOC, and he's trying to do that in Tennessee, right? Like, because the thing Democrats don't realize is in a lot of these red states, people, especially the ones that are economically doing very badly, you kind of need to have a more radical message, right? Like, you need to have, like, the reason they're voting for Trump is because Trump just stands for change. Like, he embodies rip off the Band-Aid and change, right? And so you have to have that level of energy for something positive, for like what you actually want to do that'll improve people's lives.
Yeah. All right. Well, Saikat, thank you so much for coming on. This was incredible.